Welcome to Beyond Midnight, where we peel back the romantic veneer of history to expose the raw, often brutal realities beneath. Tonight, we journey back to the heart of the Roman Empire, to the echoing stone of the Colosseum, or perhaps a more provincial amphitheater, to confront a fantasy often perpetuated by popular culture, the life of a Roman gladiator. Forget the chiseled heroes of Hollywood, the triumphant champions basking in adulation. We're here to tell you, with unflinching historical accuracy, precisely why you, a person of the modern age, with your soft hands and even softer expectations, wouldn't survive a single day as a Roman gladiator. Not even a full day. The very concept is absurd, a testament to our collective ignorance of the sheer, unadulterated horror that defined their existence. Let's begin not in the grand arena, but long before, with the moment your fate would be irrevocably sealed. You wouldn't volunteer, not truly. The auctorati, free men who willingly sold themselves into gladiatorial service, were a desperate, tiny minority, often driven by crippling debt or a perverse desire for fleeting fame, a fame that was more akin to notoriety. No, you'd likely be a slave, captured in some distant land, dragged in chains across the empire, your language unintelligible, your culture stripped away. Or perhaps you'd be a condemned criminal, a man sentenced to death, offered a faint, almost imperceptible sliver of a chance to earn your life in the arena, a chance that was statistically negligible. Or worse, you might be a Noxious, condemned to die in arena without even the dignity of a weapon, slaughtered by trained gladiators or wild beasts for public amusement, a mere prop in a grotesque spectacle. So you arrive, not at a gleaming modern sports facility, but at a ludus, a gladiator school. Imagine the smell, not the clean scent of sweat and liniment you associate with a gym. This is the pervasive stench of unwashed bodies, of stale urine and excrement from rudimentary latrines, of old blood soaked into stone and sand, of fear, and a faint, metallic tang of iron. The air is thick, humid, and heavy with the sound of grunts, the rhythmic thud of wooden swords against training dummies, the sharp crack of a whip, and the guttural shouts of the lanista, the owner and trainer of the ludus. This man, often a former gladiator himself, is no kindly coach. He is a shrewd businessman, investing his capital in human flesh, and he will protect his investment with brutal efficiency. His discipline is absolute, enforced by his doctors, veteran gladiators or former soldiers, who wield their whips with practiced ease. Your first day, if you even make it past the initial assessment, begins not with a weapon in your hand, but with a series of humiliations designed to break your spirit. You are stripped, examined like livestock, your physique judged for potential. Any signs of weakness, of rebellion, of poor health, and you might be discarded, sold off for manual labor, or simply executed. If you pass, you are branded, literally, often on the arm or thigh, a mark of ownership, a permanent scar that declares you property of the ludus. You are given a coarse tunic, a bowl of gruel, often a thick porridge of barley, beans, and ash, designed to put weight on you, not for strength, but to create a layer of fat that would make superficial wounds look more dramatic, extending the fight and thus the entertainment, and a hard plank in a communal cell, shared with dozens of other wretched souls. Sleep, if it comes, is fitful, disturbed by the groans of the injured, the nightmares of the terrified, and the constant, oppressive presence of your new reality. The next morning, the sun barely peeking over the high walls of the ludus, you are roused by harsh shouts and the crack of whips. There is no gentle introduction. Training is relentless, repetitive, and agonizing. You are taught to move not as a free man, but as a cog in a machine of violence. Your body, likely unaccustomed to such extreme exertion, screams in protest. Every muscle aches, every joint protests. You are drilled in basic stances, in the rudimentary footwork necessary for survival. You will learn to hold a rudis, a heavy wooden sword, its weight designed to build strength for the real, heavier steel. You will strike at a palace, a wooden post embedded in the ground, hundreds, thousands of times, until your arms feel like lead and your shoulders burn. This isn't about finesse, it's about brute force, endurance, and the ability to inflict damage while absorbing it. The doctors will watch, their eyes cold and critical. Any hesitation, any display of weakness, any failure to obey an order instantly will be met with a blow, a lash of the whip, or a humiliating public correction. They are not interested in your comfort, only in your transformation into an effective, valuable fighting machine. They will push you past what you believe are your limits, then push you further. Your diet, while calorically dense, is monotonous and unappetizing. Your body, unaccustomed to such a regime, will likely rebel with cramps, indigestion, and constant fatigue. There is no rest, no respite, only the relentless grind of training, day in and day out. And then there's the fear. It's a constant, gnawing presence. The fear of the Lanista, the fear of the doctors, the fear of the whip, the fear of failure, and above all, the fear of the arena. Every day spent in the ludus brings you closer to that inevitable moment. You see the injured, dragged back from the arena, some missing limbs, some with gaping wounds, some simply broken, their eyes vacant. You see the dead, carried out in silence, their bodies unceremoniously disposed of. There is no glory in their demise, only the grim reality of a life extinguished for entertainment. This constant exposure to suffering and death, the knowledge that your own end is likely to be just as brutal, would erode your sanity, strip away your humanity. You would become a shadow of your former self, a creature of instinct and fear, driven by the primal urge to survive just one more day. Even the simplest acts become fraught with peril. A misstep during training, a moment of inattention, and you could suffer a debilitating injury, a twisted ankle, a broken bone, a deep cut from a training weapon. In the Roman world, without modern medicine, even a seemingly minor injury could lead to infection, gangrene, and a slow, agonizing death. There are no antibiotics, no sterile operating rooms. A doctor or medicus attached to the ludus would be rudimentary at best, capable of setting bones, cauterizing wounds with hot irons, and perhaps administering herbal remedies. But the odds of recovery from a serious injury were slim, and even if you did recover, you might be left with a permanent disability, rendering you useless for the arena and thus worthless to your owner. A worthless gladiator was a dead gladiator. Let's consider the psychological toll. You are stripped of your name, your identity. You are given a new name, often a stage name, a brutal moniker like Ferox, fierce, or spiculous, little spear, designed to project an image, not to acknowledge your individuality. Your past is irrelevant. Your future is measured in fights, not years. You are surrounded by men in the same desperate predicament, some hardened and cynical, others broken and despairing. Trust is a luxury you cannot afford, yet camaraderie, a shared bond in suffering, might be the only thing that keeps you from succumbing entirely to the despair. But even this camaraderie is fragile, constantly undermined by the knowledge that one day you might be forced to face one of your comrades in the arena, to kill or be killed. The ludus is a microcosm of Roman society's brutality. It's a place where human life is a commodity, where suffering is entertainment, and where the line between life and death is razor-thin. You would sign, or rather, be forced to swear, the Sacramentum Gladiatorium, Iuri Vincere Verberari Feroc Necari, to be burned, to be bound, to be beat, and to be killed by the sword. This wasn't just a formality, it was a total surrender of your body and your will. You became an object, a tool for the amusement of the masses, a spectacle of violence. This oath, repeated in your mind, would be a constant reminder of your ultimate fate, a grim promise whispered by the walls of your cell. Now let's fast forward to the day of the games, the Munera. This is the day we promised you wouldn't survive. The anticipation is palpable, a mixture of dread and a strange, almost manic excitement. You are led out, perhaps as part of a pampa, a grand procession through the streets, dressed in your finest, most elaborate armor, designed not for practicality but for show. The crowds line the streets, their cheers and jeers washing over you. This is your moment of glory, a fleeting instant of recognition before the inevitable. You might see the faces of the spectators, eager, bloodthirsty, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. They see not a man, but a performance. You enter the amphitheater. The roar of the crowd hits you like a physical blow. It's deafening, overwhelming, a primal sound that speaks of collective excitement and a thirst for violence. The sheer scale of the Colosseum, or even a smaller arena, is designed to humble, to make you feel insignificant. The sun beats down on the sand of the arena floor, the arena, specially chosen to absorb blood and provide good footing. The air is thick with dust, the smell of sweat, and the distinct odor of wild animals from the cages beneath the arena, their roars and growls adding to the cacophony. You stand there perhaps alongside your opponent, perhaps alone, awaiting the signal. You are likely one of many. The games are not just one-on-one duels. They can involve mass combats, executions, and animal hunts. Your mind races, a whirlwind of fear, adrenaline, and perhaps a flicker of primal rage. Your training kicks in, a desperate attempt to focus, to remember the movements, the parries, the thrusts, but nothing can truly prepare you for this. The fight begins. The details, the specific type of gladiator you are, would dictate your armor and weaponry. Are you a murmillo, heavily armed with a large shield scutum, a short sword gladius, and a distinctive fish-crested helmet, or a threx with a smaller shield parmula and a curved sword sika? Perhaps a retiarius, lightly armored, wielding a net reedy and a trident fusina, fighting a heavily armed secutor. Each type has its strengths and weaknesses, its prescribed movements, its historical opponents. But in the chaos of the arena, strategy often dissolves into raw, desperate combat. The first blow, it's not clean, not theatrical. It's a jarring impact, the clang of steel on steel, the scrape of metal on leather. The weight of your weapon, your shield, feels immense. You move parry, thrust, driven by instinct and the muscle memory forged in the ludus. The crowd's roar rises and falls with every successful block, every near miss, every painful blow. They are not passive observers, they are participants, their emotions fueling the spectacle. The fight is a maelstrom of violence. Sweat streams into your eyes, blinding you. Your breath comes in ragged gasps. Your muscles scream. You are fighting for your life, not for glory. Your opponent is also fighting for his life, equally desperate, equally terrified. There is no honor here, only survival. You might land a blow, a solid strike that draws blood. The crowd roars its approval, a sound that is both exhilarating and terrifying. But then you take one. A glancing blow to your arm, a painful scrape from a shield, a deep cut that sears with pain. Blood, it's everywhere, not just yours, but your opponent's. It darkens the sand, making it slick. The smell of iron fills your nostrils, mingling with the acrid scent of fear and the dust churned up by your frantic movements. Your vision tunnels, focused only on your opponent, on the glint of his weapon, on the opening you desperately seek. Your ears ring with the clang of steel, the shouts of the crowd, the rasp of your own breathing. Injuries, they are not clean. A sword thrust can pierce organs, leading to internal bleeding and a slow, agonizing death. A bludgeoning blow from a shield boss can shatter bones, cause concussions, and leave you disoriented. A missed parry can result in a deep gash, severing tendons, exposing muscle, and leaving you bleeding profusely. You might be disarmed, your weapon knocked from your grasp, leaving you vulnerable, exposed. The pain is immense, overwhelming. Your body, despite your training, is not invincible. It is fragile, easily broken. You might fall, the sand grates against your skin, your armor heavy, restricting your movements. Your opponent looms over you, his weapon raised, his face a mask of grim determination. This is the moment of truth. The crowd, sensing the end, roars louder, a wave of sound that threatens to crush you. They demand a decision. The editor, the sponsor of the games, usually a wealthy citizen or politician, sits in his box watching. His thumb, raised or lowered, will decide your fate. Thumbs up, pollis verso, means death. Thumbs down, pollis pressio, means mercy or missio. But the gesture is debated by historians, and what's clear is that the crowd's will, their thirst for blood, heavily influenced the editor's decision. If you fought poorly, if you offered no entertainment, if you were deemed a coward, your chances of missio were virtually non-existent. You are a disposable commodity. Let's assume for a moment that you are granted missio. You are spared. You lie there, wounded, exhausted, humiliated, but alive. The relief is immediate, overwhelming, a wave of nausea and trembling that washes over you. But it is fleeting. You are helped up, perhaps by attendants, or you drag yourself away, bleeding, aching, your body screaming in protest. You are not a hero. You are a survivor for now. But surviving the fight is only the first hurdle. The immediate aftermath is almost as dangerous. Your wounds, if not fatal, are open invitations for infection. The arena floor, steeped in blood and grime, is far from sterile. The medicus, if one is even available, will apply rudimentary bandages, perhaps some herbal poultices, or cauterize the wound with a hot iron to stop the bleeding. The pain is excruciating, and there are no effective painkillers beyond perhaps opium or wine. The journey back to the ludus is agonizing. Every jolt of the cart, every movement, a fresh torment. Back in your cell, the pain is constant. Sleep is impossible. Fever might set in, a sign of infection taking hold. Your body, already weakened by the fight, struggles to fight off the invading bacteria. You might develop gangrene, a horrifying necrotic decay of tissue that would lead to amputation, if you were lucky enough to have it, or a slow, agonizing death. Many gladiators who survived their fights died days or even weeks later from complications of their injuries. The statistics are grim. The average gladiator fought only a handful of times, and most died within their first few bouts. A successful career might mean surviving 10 or so fights over a few years, a testament to immense skill and incredible luck. And even if you recover, what then? You return to the same routine, the ludus, the training, the constant fear. You are still a slave, still property, still destined for the arena. There is no retirement, no freedom, unless you manage to survive enough fights to earn your freedom, a rare and almost mythical achievement, often granted only to the most exceptional and popular gladiators. Even then, your body would be a wreck, scarred, broken, and forever marked by the brutality of your past. Your mind would be scarred too, haunted by the faces of those you killed, by the screams of the dying, by the roar of the crowd. The very idea of surviving a day as a Roman gladiator is a profound misunderstanding of their existence. It wasn't just about the fight itself. It was about the entire dehumanizing system that encompassed their lives. It was about the loss of identity, the constant pain, the omnipresent fear, the brutal discipline, the lack of agency, and the knowledge that your life was utterly expendable, a mere flicker of entertainment for a bloodthirsty mob. Your day would begin with the crack of the whip and the stench of the ludus, and it would likely end with a sword in your gut or an infection ravaging your body, all before the setting sun. So the next time you romanticize the figure of the gladiator, remember the reality. The anonymous bodies dragged from the arena, the screams of the dying, the stench of blood and fear, and the chilling truth that you, with your modern sensibilities and your fragile humanity, would not last a single rotation of the sun in their world. You wouldn't survive the training, let alone the arena. You wouldn't survive the fear, the hunger, the brutal discipline. You wouldn't survive the injuries, the infections, the sheer, overwhelming dehumanization. The gladiator's life was not a path to glory. It was a descent into hell, a brief, violent existence lived on the razor's edge of death, entirely for the amusement of others. And this, my friends, is just the beginning of understanding the true horror. We spoke of your individual fight, your singular moment of terror, but that fight, if it even occurred, was merely a segment of a much larger, more brutal spectacle. You wouldn't survive a day as a gladiator because a gladiator's day wasn't just a brief, dramatic duel. It was an entire, grueling, psychologically tormenting munus, a public show of blood sport that stretched from dawn until dusk, a relentless assault on the senses and the soul. Imagine yourself not yet in the arena, but waiting. You are confined in the carceres, the holding cells beneath the amphitheater, or perhaps in a less formal, more cramped space adjacent to the arena floor. The air is thick, not just with the stench of human despair, but with the pungent, musky odor of wild animals. Lions, tigers, bears, leopards, wild boars, creatures captured from the far reaches of the empire, starved and enraged, their roars and snarls echoing through the stone passages, vibrating through the very ground beneath your feet. Because the gladiatorial combat, the one you've been agonizingly trained for, is usually the afternoon's main event. Before you step onto that blood-soaked sand, you are forced to witness the morning's atrocities. The venations, the animal hunts. You hear the shouts of the venators, specialized fighters, often lightly armed, facing these magnificent, terrified beasts. You hear the screams of the animals, the thud of spears, the roars of pain and rage. Sometimes the animals are simply let loose on unarmed criminals, or even on each other, a chaotic, brutal display of raw violence. You are a captive audience to this, your nerves frayed, your stomach churning, knowing that this is just the appetizer before the main course, and that you are part of the menu. The sounds are relentless. The trumpets blare, signaling the start of another segment. The crowd roars, a wave of sound that washes over you, a collective voice of thousands demanding more blood, more death. You hear the crunch of bone, the tearing of flesh, even if you can't see it. The heat of the Roman sun, even if you are underground, permeates the stone, turning your holding cell into a stifling oven. Thirst becomes a constant companion, your mouth dry, your throat raw from the dust and the fear. And then comes the midday intermission, the meridian. This is perhaps the most dehumanizing segment of the entire day. This is when the Noxii, the condemned criminals, are brought out. These are not trained fighters. These are men and women, often utterly helpless, sentenced to death ad bestias to the beasts or ad gladium to the sword. They are given no chance, no weapons, no dignity. They are slaughtered for amusement. You might see them dragged out, naked, terrified, their pleas unheard over the roar of the crowd. They are fed to the wild animals, or forced to fight each other with blunt weapons, or simply cut down by gladiators, or even crucified in the arena. Their deaths are slow, agonizing, and utterly devoid of purpose beyond grotesque entertainment. Imagine witnessing this. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated horror of watching human beings, your fellow man, butchered in cold blood, their screams echoing in the vast amphitheater, their blood staining the sand you will soon fight upon. This is not a performance. It is a public execution, a stark reminder of the cheapness of life in the Roman Empire, and especially the cheapness of your life. The psychological impact of such a spectacle would be immense, eroding any last vestiges of hope or sanity. It would strip away your belief in justice, in mercy, in the inherent value of human life. You would be forced to confront the abyss of human cruelty, and the knowledge that you are next, or that you could easily be one of them, would be a burden almost impossible to bear. By the time the afternoon arrives, and it is finally your turn, you are already mentally and emotionally exhausted. You have spent hours in a state of heightened anxiety, bombarded by the sights and sounds of death. Your muscles are stiff from tension, your mind numb from the relentless parade of horrors. This is not the fresh, alert combatant you might imagine. This is a man pushed to the brink, his adrenaline reserves already depleted by hours of sheer terror. When you finally emerge from the dark passages into the blinding light of the arena, the roar of the crowd is no longer just a sound. It's a physical force, a tidal wave of expectation and bloodlust. The sheer scale of the amphitheater, the thousands upon thousands of faces staring down at you, is designed to overwhelm, to reduce you to an insignificant speck. You are not a person, you are an object, a prop in their grand entertainment. Even if you were a skilled fighter, a veteran of the ludus, the odds are stacked against you. The editor, the organizer of the games, might pair you against a formidable opponent, perhaps a renowned champion, to ensure a dramatic spectacle. Or you might be thrown into a gregatum fight, a mass combat involving multiple gladiators, where chaos reigns and death can come from any direction. There are no rules of engagement beyond those enforced by the Lanista and the editor, rules designed for entertainment, not fairness. Consider the heat. The arena floor, the arena, is exposed to the full glare of the Roman sun. Your heavy armor, your helmet, your shield, all would turn into an oven, trapping your body heat, dehydrating you rapidly. Sweat would pour from you, stinging your eyes, making your grip slick. The sand, chosen for its absorbency, would become a treacherous surface, shifting beneath your feet, making every movement a struggle. The dust kicked up by the combatants would coat your throat, making breathing difficult, adding to the exhaustion. And the duration. While a single duel might be over quickly, a gladiator's day could involve multiple bouts or a prolonged, drawn-out struggle designed to maximize the drama. Even if your initial fight was short, you might be expected to participate in further exhibitions or to stand ready as a reserve. The physical toll would be immense, pushing your body far beyond its limits. Your modern body, accustomed to comfort and convenience, would simply shut down under such duress. Your heart would pound, your lungs would burn, your muscles would cramp and spasm. Even for the most successful gladiators, the Primus Palace or the Summa Rudis, those who achieved fame and even a modicum of wealth, their lives were not glamorous. They were still slaves, bound by the Sacramentum Gladiatorium. Their fame was the notoriety of a condemned man, a spectacle of violence. They were paraded, admired for their brutality, but never truly respected as equals. Their bodies were scarred, their minds broken. Many suffered from chronic pain, debilitating injuries, and the psychological trauma of a life defined by death. Their diet, while designed to bulk them up, was often monotonous and lacked variety, leading to other health issues. Their luxuries, if any, were fleeting and ultimately meaningless in the face of their impending doom. The lack of agency is perhaps the most profound horror. You have no control over your life, your body, or your death. Your fate is decided by the whims of your lanista, the demands of the editor, and the fickle desires of the mob. You are a tool, a weapon, an object. Your very existence is a performance, and the curtain call is usually a gruesome death. There is no escape, no retirement plan, no quiet life in the countryside. Your world is the ludus and the arena, a cycle of pain, fear, and violence that ends only with your demise. Consider the constant threat of disease beyond battle wounds. The ludus was a crowded, unsanitary environment. Poor hygiene, close quarters, and a lack of proper medical care meant that even a common cold could escalate into a deadly infection. Dysentery, fevers, skin infections, these were constant companions, weakening the body and making it even more vulnerable to injury in the arena. You might survive a sword thrust only to succumb to a virulent strain of influenza. Your modern immune system, coddled by vaccinations and antibiotics, would be utterly overwhelmed by the pathogens of the ancient world. The gladiator's life was a slow, agonizing grind towards an almost inevitable end. Every day was a step closer to the arena, every training session a rehearsal for your death. The hope for freedom, for the Rudis, the wooden sword symbolizing discharge, was a distant, almost impossible dream, dangled before them to maintain discipline and obedience. The vast majority never saw it. They died often anonymously, their bodies carted off to the spoliarium, a grim chamber where the dead were stripped of their armor and possessions before being unceremoniously disposed of. Their names, if remembered at all, were etched on simple stone markers, crude epitaphs to lives brutally extinguished. Even within the wretched confines of the ludus, there was a perverse hierarchy, a twisted pecking order that offered a sliver of false hope to the truly desperate, and a constant source of torment for the rest. You would begin as a tyro, a novice, the lowest rung, subject to the harshest discipline, the most grueling training, and the most humiliating tasks. Above you were the veterani, those who had survived a few bouts, their bodies scarred maps of past encounters, their eyes holding a chilling emptiness or a hardened resolve. These veterani were your doctors, your instructors, wielding the whip with a detachment born of their own suffering. They were both your tormentors and perhaps your only hope of learning enough to survive a single engagement. But even among them, there was no true camaraderie, not in the sense you understand it. Every man was a rival, every lesson a painful reminder of the brutal competition that defined their shared fate. Jealousy simmered beneath the surface. For a better performance in the arena, a more impressive physique, or a perceived favoritism from the Lannister could mean the difference between life and a quicker, more agonizing death. The Lannister himself was not a patron or a mentor. He was a proprietor, a shrewd, often ruthless businessman. His ludus was an investment, and you were his chattel, his living capital. He acquired you, fed you, trained you, and then leased you out for profit. Your life had a monetary value, a price tag determined by your potential for entertainment, your skill, and your ability to draw a crowd. If you were injured, you were a liability. If you were weak, you were a waste of resources. If you died, he simply moved on to the next consignment of human flesh. There was no compassion, only cold, calculated economics. He might, on rare occasions, show a flicker of pride in a particularly successful gladiator, but it was the pride of an owner in a valuable asset, not a human being. This commercial aspect permeated every facet of your life. Your very existence was a transaction, a commodity to be bought, sold, and ultimately expended. The arena, the Colosseum, or any provincial amphitheater was not merely a venue. It was the ultimate marketplace, a stage for a macabre ballet of death, meticulously orchestrated for the consumption of the Roman populace. The editor, the wealthy citizen or magistrate sponsoring the games, invested vast sums of money not out of benevolence, but for political gain, for prestige, for the adoration of the masses. He wanted a good show, and a good show meant blood, drama, and ultimately death. Your life was a pawn in his political ambitions, a spectacle to be consumed by a crowd that numbered in the tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands. Imagine the psychological pressure of knowing that your life hangs on the whim of this single individual, influenced by the baying of the crowd. The Roman audience was not a passive observer. They were an active participant, their collective voice a powerful, terrifying force. They were desensitized to violence, conditioned by generations of similar spectacles. They craved drama, courage, and a decisive end. If you fought well, if you showed courage and skill, they might clamor for your missio, your reprieve. But if you faltered, if you showed weakness, if you fell ignominiously, their thumbs would turn, their shouts would rise, demanding your execution. They were the ultimate arbiters of your fate, and their judgment was swift, merciless, and final. You were not fighting just your opponent. You were fighting the collective will of an entire city, a wave of bloodlust that could drown any hope of survival. And what of the supposed glamour of the gladiator? The elaborate, often beautiful armor, the fanatical followers, the inscriptions on walls praising their skill. This was a cruel illusion, a gilded cage. The armor, while visually impressive, was often cumbersome, designed more for theatrical effect than optimal combat. The helmets, while protective, severely limited your vision and hearing, disorienting you further in the chaos of the arena. The fame was the notoriety of a condemned man, a celebrity in the most brutal sense. Women might be drawn to the raw masculinity and danger, but this attraction was another form of objectification, a further stripping away of your humanity. You were not a lover, you were a conquest, a temporary diversion, your body used and discarded, much like your life in the arena. Any sexual encounters, if they occurred, would be on their terms, another facet of your lack of agency, a reminder that your body was not your own. Even if you were one of the exceedingly rare few who survived enough fights to earn the rudies, the wooden sword symbolizing your freedom, your ordeal was far from over. Your body would be a wreck, a testament to years of brutal combat, chronic pain from old wounds, twisted limbs, broken bones that never healed correctly, damaged joints, scarring that would mark you for life. Your mind would be a battlefield of its own, haunted by the faces of those you killed, the screams of the dying, the roar of the crowd, the constant fear. Post-traumatic stress would be a permanent companion, leading to nightmares, anxiety, and a profound inability to reintegrate into normal society. Where would you go? What would you do? Your skills were in killing, your body broken, your spirit scarred beyond repair. Many freed gladiators became doctors themselves, perpetuating the cycle of violence, or lived out their remaining years in obscurity and poverty, their brief, glory, a distant, painful memory. The promise of freedom was a mirage for most, and for the few who achieved it, it was often a hollow victory. The sheer scale of the gladiatorial enterprise is another factor that would overwhelm you. This wasn't a niche sport, it was a vast, empire-wide industry. Thousands upon thousands of gladiators passed through the ludi and into the arenas every year. This meant a constant supply of fresh meat, a ready replacement for every fallen fighter. You were utterly expendable. Your individual life, your unique story, meant nothing in the grand scheme of this brutal machine. The vast number of participants underscored your insignificance, the disposable nature of your existence. You were a cog in a colossal engine of death, and the engine would continue to grind on, regardless of your personal fate. The very air you breathed was saturated with the Roman mindset towards death and entertainment. For the Romans, death in the arena, particularly a good death, one that was brave, defiant, or dramatic, was seen as a demonstration of virtues, of manliness and courage. It was a public spectacle designed to reinforce social order, to showcase Roman power, and to desensitize the populace to violence, preparing them for the realities of war and conquest. Your suffering was their entertainment, your death their catharsis. This cultural context, so utterly alien to modern sensibilities, would be an inescapable, suffocating presence. You would be forced to die, or to kill, not for personal glory, not for a cause you believed in, but to satisfy the morbid curiosity and bloodlust of a society that valued spectacle above human life. And finally, the complete absence of rights. As a slave or a condemned criminal, you possessed no legal standing, no recourse, no protection. You could be beaten, tortured, sold, or killed at the whim of your owner or the state, with no possibility of appeal. Your life was not your own. It belonged entirely to those who held power over you. This fundamental lack of autonomy, this absolute surrender of your will and your body, is perhaps the most insidious and soul-destroying aspect of a gladiator's existence. You would be stripped bare, not just of your clothes, but of your dignity, your identity, and your very humanity. So when we reiterate that you wouldn't survive a day as a Roman gladiator, understand that it's not just about the physical challenge, though that alone would be insurmountable. It's about the complete annihilation of everything you hold dear as a modern individual. Your freedom, your rights, your sense of self-worth, your physical and mental well-being. Your soft hands, your uncalloused feet, your unscarred skin would be the least of your problems. Your mind, accustomed to safety nets and basic human decency, would simply unravel under the relentless, multifaceted assault of the ludus and the arena. You would become a broken thing, a shadow long before the sun had completed its first arc across the Roman sky. The gladiator's life was a descent into a hell of human cruelty and indifference, a journey from which there was no return, only a swift, brutal end, or a prolonged, agonizing decay. Let's return to the ludus, your supposed home. It is not merely a training ground. It is a prison, a barracks, and a charnel house all rolled into one. The cells, if you could even call them that, are cramped, damp, and perpetually dim. There is no privacy. You sleep on a hard plank, perhaps with a thin, lice-ridden straw mat, side by side with dozens of other men, their bodies scarred, their minds tormented. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, fear, and the lingering odor of the rudimentary latrines, which are often just trenches or holes in the ground, shared by everyone. Disease spreads like wildfire in such conditions. A cough, a sneeze, a festering cut, all are potential death sentences. Your modern immune system, accustomed to a relatively sterile environment, would be overwhelmed within hours, succumbing to pathogens that your ancestors might have developed some resistance to, but which would be entirely alien and virulent to you. The diet, while often calorically rich to put weight on you, was monotonous and designed for function, not nutrition or enjoyment. The barley eaters, hordire, as gladiators were sometimes called, consumed a thick, often bland porridge of barley, beans, and dried fruit, sometimes supplemented with animal fats or ash. This diet was specifically chosen to build a thick layer of subcutaneous fat. Why fat? Not for strength, but because a layer of fat would make superficial cuts look more dramatic, allowing the gladiator to bleed profusely without immediately hitting vital organs or muscle, thus prolonging the fight and enhancing the spectacle for the baying crowd. Imagine consuming such a diet day in and day out, your body becoming a canvas for theatrical injury, your very metabolism manipulated for the amusement of others. You would crave fresh food, variety, anything to break the monotony, but it would never come. Your digestive system, accustomed to diverse modern cuisine, would rebel violently. Hygiene, a concept we take for granted, was rudimentary at best. Access to water for washing was limited, often cold and shared. Personal grooming was minimal. Lice, fleas, and other parasites would be constant companions, burrowing into your skin, causing incessant itching and discomfort, and acting as vectors for disease. Dental hygiene was non-existent. You would suffer from tooth decay, abscesses, and gum disease, leading to constant pain and infection, further weakening your already stressed body. The lack of proper sanitation, the open wounds, the shared living spaces, these were not just discomforts, they were a death trap. A simple cut, a common occurrence during training, could fester into a life-threatening infection within hours, turning your leg into a swollen, gangrenous mess, leading to amputation or a slow, agonizing demise without the aid of antibiotics. The discipline in the ludus was absolute, enforced with a brutality that would shock your modern sensibilities. The doctors, often former gladiators themselves, were unyielding. Disobedience, sloppiness, or a perceived lack of effort would be met with immediate and severe punishment. The whip was omnipresent, its crack a constant reminder of your subservient status. But beyond the whip, there were other forms of physical torment. Feruli, heavy wooden rods used for brutal beatings, stocks and chains for prolonged immobilization, solitary confinement in dark, unventilated cells, and even starvation as a means of control. Every moment of your day was under surveillance. There was no escape from the watchful, cold eyes of your overseers. This constant threat of physical violence, coupled with the complete lack of personal freedom, would erode your sense of self, your will to resist, turning you into a compliant, terrified automaton. Your social standing, even if you were an auctoratus, a free man who voluntarily became a gladiator, was abysmal. Gladiators were infames, a legal and social status that stripped them of their rights as citizens. They could not vote, could not hold public office, could not testify in court, and were considered morally degraded. They were akin to actors, prostitutes, and pimps in the Roman social hierarchy, necessary for entertainment, but utterly despised and reviled by the respectable classes. Even if you survived and gained your freedom, this infamy would cling to you like a shroud, marking you as an outcast, forever tainted by your past. This social degradation, the knowledge that you were viewed as less than human by the society you entertained, would be a profound psychological burden, contributing to the complete breakdown of your self-worth. The business of gladiators was intricate and ruthless. The Lanista would scour the empire for new recruits, buying up slaves, prisoners of war, and condemned criminals. He was a speculator in human lives, constantly assessing his inventory, making decisions based purely on profit margins. If you were deemed too old, too weak, too injured, or simply not promising enough, you might be sold off for manual labor, or even executed to save on feeding costs. The editor, the wealthy sponsor of the games, would negotiate with the Lanista for the services of his gladiators, often paying exorbitant fees for star performers. The games themselves were massive logistical undertakings, requiring immense capital. The editor spared no expense on spectacle, elaborate sets, exotic animals, sometimes even flooding the arena for mock naval battles, naumatia. All this grandiosity was built upon the backs of men like you, whose lives were the ultimate price of admission. You were a piece of the grand machinery, a disposable cog in a vast, brutal entertainment industry. And the audience, the thousands upon thousands of Romans who packed the amphitheaters, were not merely passive spectators. They were an active, demanding, often cruel force. They came not just for the violence, but for the drama, the bravery, the spectacle of a man facing death. They would cheer for a particularly skillful parry, groan at a missed thrust, and roar their approval at a decisive blow. They would mock cowards and demand their immediate execution. Their collective will, expressed through shouts and gestures, held immense power over the editor's decision regarding Missio. Imagine the chilling awareness that your life or death depended on the fickle, bloodthirsty whim of a mob. Every move you made, every grunt of effort, every drop of blood was for them. You were performing for your life, and the audience was the ultimate, merciless critic. The pre-fight rituals themselves would be a psychological torture. On the eve of a major game, gladiators were often given a cena libera, a public free meal. This was not a kindly gesture, but another part of the spectacle. You would be paraded before the public, a living display of the men who would fight and die tomorrow. People would come to gaze upon you, to size you up, to speculate on your chances, to perhaps even bid farewell to a popular fighter. This public display, the knowledge that you were being observed and judged before your ultimate trial, would amplify the dread, making the hours leading up to the fight an unbearable eternity. You would eat if you could stomach it, knowing that this might be your last meal, surrounded by the morbid curiosity of strangers. Even the very ground beneath your feet, the arena, was a constant reminder of death. It was not just sand, it was sand mixed with clay, chosen specifically for its ability to absorb blood and provide good footing. It was a surface designed to soak up the lifeblood of men and beasts, a grim, absorbent canvas for the day's slaughter. Every step you took on it, every time you knelt or fell, you would be touching the residual evidence of countless deaths before you, a chilling premonition of your own likely fate. The smell of old blood, mixed with fresh, would permeate the air, a constant, visceral reminder of the arena's true purpose. And the layers of this grim reality, the sheer depth of their suffering, have now, we hope, unfolded before you with an unblinking clarity. We have delved into the physical torment, the relentless training that would break your modern body, the horrific injuries, and the ever-present threat of infection in a world devoid of true medicine. We've explored the psychological assault, the constant fear, the dehumanization, the stripping away of your identity, the forced witnessing of unspeakable atrocities, and the crushing weight of knowing your life was a mere spectacle utterly expendable. We've touched upon the systemic dehumanization, the Lanista as owner, the editor as a political manipulator, the crowd as a bloodthirsty arbiter of life and death, and the complete absence of rights or autonomy. We've immersed ourselves in the pervasive squalor of the ludus, the crushing discipline, the ignominy of the infam's status, and the chilling finality of the spoliarium. To truly comprehend why you wouldn't survive a single day as a Roman gladiator is to dismantle every romanticized notion, every Hollywood fantasy, and confront the stark, unvarnished truth. It is to understand that their existence was not a path to glory, but a slow, agonizing descent into hell. It was a life lived on the razor's edge of death, where every breath was a struggle, every moment a battle against overwhelming odds. Your modern body, accustomed to comfort, sanitation, and medical intervention, would succumb to the sheer physical demands and the inevitable injuries. Your modern mind, accustomed to freedom, dignity, and a sense of personal worth, would shatter under the relentless psychological pressure, the constant terror, and the profound, absolute lack of control over your own fate. You would break, not just physically, but spiritually. The gladiator's day was not a singular event, but a continuous, grinding nightmare, a cycle of violence and despair from which there was almost no escape. It was a testament to the extreme cruelty and indifference that could be woven into the fabric of an empire, where human life, particularly that of the enslaved or condemned, held negligible value against the thirst for entertainment. So let the romantic images fade. Let the echoes of the Colosseum remind us not of heroism, but of suffering. Let the gladiatorial arena stand as a stark monument to the fragility of human life and the depths of human cruelty. Because the truth is, you wouldn't survive a day. You wouldn't survive an hour. You wouldn't survive the very first brutal breath within that horrifying, inescapable reality. This has been another deep dive into the brutal realities of history, here on Beyond Midnight. If you found this exploration of the gladiator's true existence enlightening, or perhaps unsettling, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue peeling back the comfortable layers of historical myth and confronting the raw, often uncomfortable truths that lie beneath. Like this video if you wish to see more unvarnished accounts of the past, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next journey beyond the veil of midnight. Thank you for joining us.